I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump has signed an executive order to begin unwinding the health care law. The order makes lower premium plans more widely available and allows consumers to buy health insurance across state lines. Officials say it may not be finalized in time to impact coverage for 2019. And Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, says he's not leaving his job anytime soon.
I'm not quitting today. I don't believe, and I just talked to the president, I don't think I'm being fired today.
President Trump has introduced his pick for Homeland Security Secretary. Kirstjen Nielsen is Deputy Chief of Staff under John Kelly. Now, she previously worked as a special assistant to former President George W. Bush. The House has passed a $36.5 billion hurricane aid package. $16 billion will pay for flood insurance claims and emergency funds to help Puerto Rico. Florida and Texas had requested about $40 billion. The death toll from wildfires raging in California is now 26. Officials expect that to rise. More than 8,000 firefighters are battling the blazes with additional manpower and equipment on the way. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg goes to Washington and pledges full congressional cooperation from the social network, the COO's take on the investigation into election interference, and when the public can expect to see more than 3,000 Russian-linked ads. Plus, my wide-ranging exclusive interviews with executives from Amazon's C-suite, what they had to say about Amazon's $4 billion windfall after shifting to the cloud and improving the customer experience with AI. And China officially demands a piece of its biggest tech companies, but do tech board members want Beijing at the table? We'll put the potential power grab under the microscope. But first, to our lead. Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg says the company absolutely supports public release of the 3,000 plus Russian bot ads during last year's presidential election, but she says it is up to Congress to decide the appropriate time to do so. Sandberg was in D.C. this week to meet with House Intelligence Committee members. She spoke with Axios to explain the importance of releasing these ads. Take a listen.
We're giving them our piece, but they can understand the whole picture because they have access to much more information than we do. And so what I reiterated in those meetings is that we think it's important that they get the whole picture and that they explain that transparently to the American public.
Joining me now to discuss, Sarah Frier, who covers Facebook for Bloomberg, and Bill Maris, founding CEO of Google Ventures and founder of Section 32, a new fund, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Sarah, I want to start with you. Talk to us about what Sandberg had to say and what it appears her strategy and Facebook's strategy is here.
Well, Facebook has been over-communicating in this whole ordeal. They really want to make the point that they're taking responsibility for what it was that ran on their platform, but that they're not taking responsibility for the fact that there were divisive political ads. And in fact, Sandberg mentioned several times during this interview that Facebook is all about free speech. They don't want to limit anyone's expression. And of course, they don't want to be in a position of saying what can and can't be said on Facebook in terms of ideas. But when it comes to fake accounts, she's taking responsibility.
Bill, how bad is the position that Facebook is in here?
I don't want to overstate it. I think these are good people. I know Mark and Sheryl. I think they're dealing with a platform that was weaponized in an unpredictable way, and I think it's a surprise to a lot of us. But I also think there's some responsibility to bear for the users of Facebook to not make your decisions based on advertisements that you might click on.
So what is that responsibility?
I think it's to take seriously your responsibility in this democratic republic to understand the issues, to look at the source of the information, and make an assessment. And wouldn't say that everyone is a victim in that sense. I think you've got a nation state in Russia that is trying to influence an election, and I think we need to focus on that as the real problem. And I wouldn't hold Facebook's feet too much to the fire over this.
Sarah, Sandberg spoke with members of the House Intelligence Committee, right, while she was in Washington. What do we know about those discussions?
We know that Sandberg explained to them really how things are working on their end, the extent to which they've gone into looking into the Russian ads, but the fact that they realize that there's more to do. And she's asking for cooperation from the intelligence community. They've looked into stuff that came from what's known as the Internet Research Agency in Russia, this Russian troll farm that's known to be connected with the government. But they need to know the other places that they should be looking if there is more of a greater threat. And this is something that Zuckerberg came out and said after the whole discovery of Russian ads is with intelligence communities around the world, they want to be looped in on what they should be looking for and work with other companies as well.
Bill, your former company, Google, is involved here. I mean, you've got fake news spreading across the platform, Russian bot ads on YouTube. I mean, what is Google's responsibility here? You
know, I think all of the owners and operators of large tech platforms have a responsibility. At the same time, I think what you're seeing is like I said, a nation state that is trying to take advantage of a population by dividing and making us choose sides and fomenting dissent among its own people. And actually, it's working as we're fighting with each other rather than looking at the problem, which is maybe we're not under attack with missiles, but we're under attack electronically. And that can be almost as dangerous.
Sarah, Facebook is saying they're making changes. They're hiring another 1,000 people. They're saying that all humans will approve or disapprove of any political advertising that's bought, correct?
They're saying that those will go through a manual review, yes. The 1,000 people they hired are looking specifically at ads that are targeted to people based on their politics or their race, things that might lend themselves to a little bit more incendiary content.
Bill, I mean, look, as you say, these are actions coming from a particular nation state. But now that we know what is the responsibility of these platforms, what should they be doing? I
think they're doing the right things, cooperating with Congress, trying to be as transparent as possible, answering questions, being willing to open source what the ads were, who they were targeted at, and trying to figure out the problem. I mean, I have a lot of faith in these companies and and mostly the people that work there to try and do the right things. And I think we're in the midst of an investigation. So what more can we ask of them other than to cooperate with it?
Sarah, Sandberg answered a lot of questions, but what didn't she answer?
She didn't. One thing that she dodged a few times was the question of whether the targeting on the ads that ran backed by Russia had anything related to the targeting of the Trump campaign. That's one of the things that investigators will be looking at to try to see if there were any ties between Trump's strategy and Russia's strategy here and any evidence that they were working together. She said that when the ads come out, they will also release the targeting data, and I guess we can come up with a conclusion then.
Bill, looking forward, like how big a crisis is this? So the election aside, fake news, political advertising, how hard are these issues going to be for these platforms to deal with?
Guess what? If it's not Facebook, it'll be a different platform. So I think the key here is to secure these platforms as much as we can from future influence. And they will find other ways to try and foment dissent and hurt the American people. And I think the key is to try and minimize that as much as possible. I don't think it's a crisis. A crisis is a fire raging through Northern California, a hurricane that destroys Puerto Rico. Those are crises, or people are dying. This is election interference, which we should take seriously, but I don't want to also overstate it.
All right, Bill Maris, formerly of GV, now Section 32. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook for us, thank you so much. All right, Bloomberg Tech is live streaming, of course, on Twitter. You can check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Tesla is recalling about 11,000 Model X SUVs due to possible issues with their second-row fold-flat seat. Only about 3% of the electric SUVs are being recalled, and only 3% of them are expected to have issues. The problem, which was discovered in internal testing, involves incorrectly adjusted seat cables. Tesla said it hasn't received reports of accidents related to this problem. Well, Cobalt announced today that it's raised another $14 million of growth capital, bringing the total amount raised to $89 million. The music royalty company startup counts none other than Bill Maris as the round's lead investor, receiving $14 million from his new firm, Section 32. He is also joining Cobalt's board. Still with us, founding CEO of Google Ventures and Section 32 founder Bill Maris. So you've raised $160 million in this new fund, and you've already made, in about a year, 17 or 18
That's
investments.
correct. Yep.
How do you keep up a pace like that?
Well, we have to remember.
VCs only make like 1 or 2 investments a year.
I'm not your average VC. I think at Google, when I was running that, we were doing 50 to 100 investments a year. So the pace of 15 to 17 a year feels somewhat leisurely. And I also am drawing on a network of entrepreneurs and founders that I've known for quite some time. Cobalt is a great example. My wife is a Cobalt musician, but Willard is also, who's the founder, is like family. And I've enjoyed working with him. And that was the first company I called when I set out to start this fund.
So when you look at new investments, potential investments, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot of good ideas? Are you seeing a lot of promise? Are you seeing high valuations?
Definitely seeing high valuations. I'm seeing the market has changed tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years. I think it's changing in a way where it may not change back. By that I mean SoftBank is out there with a almost $100 billion fund, which causes a lot of strange behaviors for startups. It compresses returns because valuations then go up somewhat artificially. And I'm also seeing changes with regard to cryptocurrencies and coin offerings that may obsolete a large part of the venture business.
Really? How so?
When you're a founder and you can raise crowdsourced money from a large group of people in a week, that makes it a much less painful process sometimes than talking to people like myself and going through the analysis and the time that it takes to raise venture money. And that's a more attractive proposition to a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's going to change the business.
So how dramatically do you think this could impact Silicon Valley?
Oh, I think that these technologies are likely to fundamentally shift. It won't obsolete everything, but it will fundamentally shift the way that startups are funded over time and the way a lot of transactions are handled.
So what does it mean for the big VCs, the prominent VCs?
I think if you are a large VC, prominent VC with a reputation and deal flow, you'll have to adjust your business slightly, but I don't think it's the bell isn't necessarily tolling right now. But there are a lot of venture funds and a lot of people with capital and a lot of money waiting to invest in startups, and that is going to change the way that we invest.
So the bell is tolling for that.
We'll see.
Bitcoin, you've invested in Coinbase, and yet Jamie Dimon says Bitcoin is a fraud. Which one is it?
Well, Coinbase isn't a Bitcoin company. Coinbase is a platform on which people can trade cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin being one of them. I think Jamie is likely incorrect in his assessment. I think there may be a bubble. There's money to be made and lost, but it's I think if you take the value of all of those startups, it's like a $70 billion industry. And if that's a bubble, it's not a very big bubble. There's some enduring technology there that is likely to last, and so we disagree on that.
What about AI? I mean, we've talked a lot about AI. Some people say it's overhyped. Some people say, like Elon Musk, it's going to be the end of the world.
Yeah. I think if you think Russian interference in the election via ads placed on a social media platform was bad, AI could be much worse. So I am actually more in Elon's camp here, that I think we should be gravely concerned about the potential for misuse of a technology this important and powerful, but also incredibly optimistic at the way it might transform society for the better.
So what are the potentially very dangerous consequences? I mean, what do you see happening?
Well, if you can create a supercomputer that can learn and teach itself and outsmart all people, I think, let's look at it in these terms. It would have been very difficult to predict 5 years ago that Russia would try and interfere in an election to get someone like Donald Trump elected at that time, based on what we knew about that platform. So to look forward 5 years or 10 years and think the same about AI, I think whatever prediction we make will be incorrect, because there will be some ways that technology is used that is unpredictable and probably negative in some ways, and I'm optimistic that we will find the right way to deal with it, but there's reason to be concerned.
So you think there's a potential for an AI apocalypse?
Oh, certainly.
How so?
Well, think about the power of a supercomputer that can teach itself and is smarter than anyone on the planet. Who controls that technology? Is it a private company? Is it a government? Is it our government? Is it a different government? And what if there are more than one? Or what if those computers decide that humans would make nice pets and or not very helpful to their future? So I don't think that's overstating it, and I think it warrants concern and conversation. Just like if we were developing the first nuclear bomb, we would need to think carefully about unleashing that technology. It can be used in very positive ways and very terrible ways.
Okay, let's talk about Uber. GV is a huge Uber investor. We've seen a lot of drama. Travis is out. There is a new CEO. What do you make of the reckoning?
I don't think Travis is ever out. He's maybe not CEO anymore.
Well, and that's another issue.
I would like to think that season 1 of Uber has ended. I'm waiting for its season 2 premiere because I'm hoping it will be a better series of episodes. I think very highly of the new CEO, Dara, and I'm very optimistic that they're trying to correct the things that were done wrong.
How much responsibility do investors like GV bear for the problem getting out of control or giving Travis too much control?
I can only speak for myself. And whatever influence I had was not useful, was not heeded.
What were the kinds of of advice that you gave?
Giving advice implies that someone answered the phone. So I think...
So he just didn't pick up?
What I would say is I think, sure, investors bear some responsibility, but I think we should hold those who took the actions to be responsible. I mean, you're a minority shareholder. You don't have control. We didn't have a board seat, didn't really have a vote. And so you try and influence things as much as you can to go in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I think the right thing has happened and is happening, which are, it's all being held to account. There is a reckoning, and hopefully things will be set straight. They've got some things to fix.
All right. Bill Maris, Section 32. Thank you so much for stopping by. Always great to have you here.
Thanks, Emily.
On the show.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, Amazon says that its virtual assistant technology is at the early stages and has a ways to go. The surprising lengths the e-commerce giant is willing to go to. Next, this is Bloomberg. Amazon tells us it wouldn't rule out partnerships with major rivals if that means improving its voice-activated technology. I sat down with Vice President of Alexa and Echo Devices, Tony Reed, for an exclusive interview and asked what challenges she is most focused right now on to better improve the customer experience. So what are the challenges that still remain to get more people to do this? What are the challenges that you are most focused on?
I am most focused on trying to reduce friction for customers and drive towards what we call our customer experience North Star. And really the idea there is that Alexa is more human-like. So it's conversational. We can shorten the path from where the customer's starting and where they want to be with less and less work on their part.
So is Alexa going to be responding with the uh-hs like the SNL skit?
Maybe. That's sort of I joke that is completely what another human would do if someone was telling a very long story. And
so, how much further can you go when it comes to just understanding natural human language, whether it's, an adult talking or a child talking, or are we there when it comes to how much improvement can be made?
Oh, we're definitely not there. It's day one, super early stages. I mean, we like to say we're at the tipping point of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so I think we'll see a lot of improvement over the next few years even.
How so?
I just think the technology is there, and having ourselves included, but developers being able to build features in a cloud that's sitting on top of AWS allows for a lot of compute power. And I think that you'll just see a ton of innovation out of that.
So what's missing from Alexa?
What's missing? I think part of it is that kind of North Star human, sort of conversational behavior. Alexa and the skills that we have today are great at reducing friction and making the customer experience very delightful. But we still have a long ways to go to make it an even more robust experience.
You recently partnered with one of your biggest rivals, Microsoft and Cortana. What do you see customers using Cortana that they might not get on Alexa? Is it Office? Is it calendaring? Is it email?
Yeah, definitely. It's in the space of productivity. I'm actually really excited to see this launch because I think for us, we see this world in which there will be multiple AIs. You'll have AIs who are experts in certain domains and bring another unique set of data. It's kind of like the internet in a way. And so customers will be able to search out experts in a space, and then you'll probably have a broad set of AIs who sort of, can handle the breadth.
Will we see you partnering with other rivals like Google, like Apple with the HomePod coming in December?
Why not?
How do you make those calculations?
For us, it's very customer focused. We operate, Amazon has for years, and it's served us well, but we are super passionate about the customer first approach, and we work backwards from that. So if we believe it will benefit customers and improve the experience, we'll work towards it.
Is the vision for Alexa sort of the center of a whole network of home devices, or is it the home device in the home?
Well, we see Alexa as being this ambient, experience in the home, and customers can invoke this experience wherever they are. We also see that going outside of the home. We've announced partnerships with automobile manufacturers, so Alexa will be embedded in some of the cars. BMW is one of them. We have a partnership with the Wen, so then when you're traveling for business and you're checking into a hotel, you can experience Alexa there. So we see that going beyond the home as well.
Do you see home security potentially as an area of interest?
Potentially.
And then going beyond the home, what do you mean by that?
More like the auto space is an example, or hotel rooms.
Obviously, Amazon and Alexa got a huge jump on this market, but now the competitors are there. What are you doing to stay ahead? Like, is there anything that you see your rivals doing that is impressive? You're going, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with a lot of the innovation that's happening in this space. We are super focused on building new features and skills for our customers. We stay very focused on that, and we think in the end, customers will win.
That was Tony Reed, Vice President of Alexa and Echo Devices. Coming up, Amazon is not only trying to take over the home with Alexa, but it is also keeping its head in the cloud. Next, our exclusive interview with the company's CEO of web services on getting to the front of the market. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with First Word News. President Trump today signed an executive order to expand health insurance options for some Americans. It's a move he says will result in, quote, staggering competition between insurance companies.
My administration will explore how we can expand something called short-term, limited duration insurance. These health insurance policies are not subject to any very expansive and expensive Obamacare coverage mandates and rules.
White House Chief of Staff John Kelly conducted today's press briefing and began by putting to rest rumors he was stepping down. General Kelly also called the North Korean nuclear missile threat manageable. The fight against President Trump's travel ban is back in the courts. New York and 4 other states are involved in a legal filing to block the ban before it takes effect this month. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman tells Bloomberg the revised ban is another attempt to circumvent anti-discrimination law.
There is no travel really from North Korea, so we don't think that solves the fundamental problem that the overwhelming majority of the people who will be affected by this are Muslims.
The new travel restrictions are scheduled to take effect October 18th. The U.S. is pulling out of UNESCO, the United Nations cultural agency. For years, the U.S. has criticized UNESCO for what it sees as anti-Israel bias. The U.S. quit funding the agency in 2011 after it voted to include the Palestinians as a member. Meeting today with workers and labor unions, French President Emmanuel Macron started negotiations on the second phase of his labor market overhaul. The discussions come come as protests continue across France over the first set of measures Macron signed last month. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 here in New York, 8:30 Friday morning in Sydney. My colleague Adam Haig has a look at the markets. Adam, good morning.
Good morning. Well, we're up and running for the US earnings season, and a lot of the traders coming in will be going through those JP Morgan numbers and Citi numbers. Obviously, those weak trading volumes are a particular area of concern. The pound has rallied nicely. We've heard a report in Handelsblad that Michel Barnier may give the UK a couple of years of extra wiggle room as the Brexit negotiations continued. The pound had been largely down through most of the session. And all eyes now turn to the US CPI number tonight. That's the big figure on the radar today. I'm Adam Haig for Bloomberg Technology in Sydney.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Amazon's hugely profitable web services division says the shift to the cloud is just beginning. Sales at the AWS unit surged 42% last quarter to more than $4 billion. I sat down for an exclusive interview with Amazon Web Services CEO Andy Jassy at the GeekWire Summit in Seattle and asked if the growth of the unit had surpassed even his wildest expectations. Take a listen.
Well, it's certainly grown really fast, and I don't think any of us would have had the audacity to predict it would grow as fast as it has. But I think we always believed it had the chance to be a really significant business, and that's because just inside of Amazon, which is a really strong technology company, we had a lot of internal development teams that wanted help moving faster, more cost effectively, and building their applications on top of an infrastructure technology platform. And so the fact that Amazon really wanted this made us think that third parties would really want it. And then, of course, I don't think we would have predicted that it would be a $15 billion revenue run rate business growing a little bit over 40% year over year this quickly. And that I don't think we would have predicted that, we would have several times the size business of the next 14 providers combined, or that, we'd have millions of active customers, or that we'd have a 6 to 7 year head start. So all those things were big surprises to us.
Of course, your competitors now want this too. How do you make sure Amazon stays in the leading position?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, it's not a surprise to us that every large technology company in the world is interested in building a replica of what AWS has done. It's such a great value proposition for customers that it's why it's being adopted so fast, so others will want to participate. I think that there are some real differences between the platforms today. I think the first thing is that AWS just has a lot more functionality by a large amount than anybody else, and we're also iterating at a faster clip so that gap and capability continues to extend. And I think there are really different ecosystems around these platforms. It's not just the thousands of systems integrators who've built practices around AWS, but most ISVs or SaaS providers will adapt their software to work on one technology infrastructure platform. Some will do two. Very few will have the time to do three. And they all start with AWS just because we have such a significant market segment leadership position. And then I think the maturity of the platforms are also in really different places. Mm-hmm. We have this expression we use internally that there's no compression algorithm for experience. Mm-hmm. And that's because you just can't learn certain lessons until you get to different elbows of the curve and scale. And with several times the size business of the next 14 providers combined, they just haven't learned those lessons yet. And so you see that in all kinds of manifestations of performance.
You just added GE as a customer. Same time, you lost Spotify to Google, Bank of America to Microsoft. Tell us about the lengths that you're going to not just get new customers, but make sure you keep the customers that you have.
Yeah, we have millions of active customers. And the way to think about an active customer for AWS is it's a non-Amazon entity that's used our platform in the last 30 days. So we have millions of active customers, and they span the gamut. So, most of the big successful startups have built their businesses completely from scratch on top of AWS. And these are companies like Pinterest and Airbnb and Slack and Domo and Robinhood. But over the last 3 years, the enterprise and public sector adoption has really dramatically increased in the cloud and in AWS. And you see every meaningful vertical business segment using AWS, whether if you're talking about oil and gas, it's Shell and BP and Hess. In financial services, it's Capital One, Intuit, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and FINRA. In manufacturing, GE, you mentioned, they've been actually working with AWS for a long time. They're moving 9,000 applications to AWS. And Schneider Electric and Philips and technology, Netflix runs completely everything on top of AWS, even though we compete with them in our video business. And then in the public sector, we have nearly 3,000 government agencies worldwide using AWS. So we just have a lot more customers in every imaginable segment than you'll find elsewhere.
You mentioned Netflix. Obviously, they're your biggest competitor in streaming. Is there any scenario under which that would change, where you wouldn't serve them?
No. Well, it's Amazon's consumers' biggest competitor in streaming, but AWS, from the very start, was set up as a separable entity with a separable leadership team. And we realized that if we wanted to serve a lot of Amazon's consumer business competitors, we had to not only have the most functionality and the best platform, but we also had to treat those customers as every bit as important as Amazon's consumer business. And in fact, I think if you were to talk to Netflix, if you asked Reed Hastings, he would tell you that AWS treats Netflix as every bit as important as Amazon's consumer team. Amazon's consumer team may argue we treat Netflix even better than we treat our consumer team. But I think that you have to live to that. And Amazon's consumer business is a really big AWS customer, but they really are just one other large external customer. That's the way we treat the relationship.
Google, Facebook, now even Alibaba and Baidu have offices in Seattle. What are you doing to make sure your talent doesn't get poached?
I think the most important thing, is true whether there's competition from other companies or not, is you want to hire people that fit your culture. And for us, that's builders. We disproportionately index on hiring builders. And when I say builders, I mean people who like to invent, people who like to look at different customer experiences and assess what's wrong with them and reinvent them. And people who get that launch is the starting line, not the finish line. Anything that you want to do that's going to be successful long term, you have to listen to what customers tell you is important and then keep iterating on their behalf. So you want to hire what fits with your cultures, which are builders for us. And then you want to actually make it a place where builders can build.
Jeff Wilke professed an affinity for his hometown of Pittsburgh. He hopes that it goes to a place where there's strong STEM education, public education. Are you jostling for your hometown? Are you jostling for New York?
That's above my pay grade, Emily. I mean, I think none of us really know at this point where it's going to be. We're in the middle of a process, and we'll have to all see.
The DOJ under Trump, the DOJ under Obama have both been pretty aggressive in their contention that cloud companies need to turn over data of customers, and even customers that are overseas, and even when that data is overseas. How much of a concern is that for your overseas customers? How much of a concern is that for you?
I think customers from the very beginning of AWS have always cared about this issue, and they always want to make sure that the data they store in the cloud in AWS is secure and private. And our view is that our customers' data is our customers' data. And in the scheme of things, if you look, even though it's kind of become a juicy, interesting issue, there just haven't been very many occasions of governments being able to, even asking for the data. But for companies that are worried about it, what they do is they encrypt the data. And when you encrypt the data and you keep the keys yourself, even in the odd event that a government asks, to try and get access, and for us, they have to, if they ask, we don't just say yes. We always advocate on behalf of our customers. They have to come with a subpoena, and even in the odd cases where they might be able to come with a subpoena and have a legal right to the data, if you've encrypted the data and you own the keys, there's not much people can do with it.
Where do you see AWS in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Well, gosh, I mean, I think that, and we've been saying this for a while, but I think you're seeing it bear out in the market, that the vast majority of computing is going to be done in the cloud. I mean, very few companies in the fullness of time, I don't know if that's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 15 years from now, but very few companies will own their own data centers, and those that do will have much smaller footprints, and all of that is moving to the cloud. So I think we're at the very beginning of this big shift. As I mentioned, I think you can expect a lot of geographic expansion from us. I think you can expect huge investments and continued substantial capabilities in machine learning and AI and connected devices and IoT. I think the database space is radically changing in this world, where I think customers are fed up with what's been the case the last couple decades, and I think they really want database freedom. It's why it's, Aurora, which is our database engine, is the fastest growing service in the history of AWS. I think you'll see more and more serverless. And I think voice will be an increasingly larger percentage of the total applications out there.
My exclusive interview there with Amazon Web Services CEO Andy Jassy. Now, you may call it a sign of the times. Nike is selling sneakers on Groupon, the daily deals site. The world's biggest sports shoemaker is having a 48-hour sale with discounts of up to 40%. Nike sales in North America fell 3% last quarter. Retail analyst Matt Powell of NPD Group says the sneaker industry is like the rest of teen retail now. It needs sales to move products. Coming up, as the competition among cities to secure Amazon's second headquarters heats up, we'll hear from Washington Governor Jay Inslee. He gives us advice on what the tech giant is looking for and how they keep talent in the state. This is Bloomberg. A new milestone for Bitcoin. The cryptocurrency rose to a record, smashing the $5,000 mark. As recently as December, Bitcoin was trading at less than $1,000. Recently, there have been reports that China would ease regulations on Bitcoin. Plus, Goldman Sachs is exploring how it could help clients trade cryptocurrencies. Now, cities across the U.S. are ramping up their campaigns to secure the location for Amazon's second headquarters, with initial bids due October 19th. Washington Governor Jay Inslee knows all about what it takes to keep tech firms happy in his state. He spoke to Bloomberg's Karen Weiss about Amazon search and how Washington lures tech talent to the state.
This is, in a sense, a signal of Amazon's incredible success. I mean, they're growing faster than maybe any other corporation in world history. They're still adding another 6,000 jobs in Seattle, I think, are posted right now with hundreds of thousand square feet. So the growth is going to continue in Washington State, and I think this is a signal of their aspirations and ambitions and growth curve that geography is an issue. So it is not shocking to us that such a rapidly expanding business would be willing to look at some other options, but our state is going to suggest some locations for them, and there's going to be some proposals from a variety of communities around our state in the event that they really do see Washington as a potential option. But one way or another, they're going to grow here in our state. It's a perfect place for them, and I think some proof of that is their success to date. So we're glad they're succeeding.
And when you look at it, kind of their growth here and what's to come, are there advice or things that you would share with other governors as they look to how to manage or how to attract such a large and successful company?
Well, I think we have a strategy for technological growth in our state, which is succeeding not just for Amazon, but with Google and Facebook and Expedia and Microsoft. We have a whole host of companies that have had rapid expansion, and that's several pillars of our strategy. One is the most important is the development of intellectual talent. We know that the number one recruitment tool is intellectual talent, to make it available and help it grow, and that's why we've been so focused on growing our computer science programs at our university, growing our graduation rate in our schools. And secondly, having an open door, welcoming approach to welcome talent to our community. And this is a kind of a secret sauce that we have welcomed smart people from other states and other countries to be able to help to build these companies. And that has been very attractive to develop the nucleus of an ecosystem, which then continues to build once you hit critical mass of intellectual talent, which we clearly are. And what we've learned is that these companies and industries cross-pollinate. So a computer scientist that might be working in the aerospace industry one year is working in the biomedical industry the next. So we've got that critical mass, and it continues to feed on itself to grow these businesses. Now, we also have some smart approaches about policies. We have a light touch from a regulatory standpoint. It's one of the reasons we have almost 24 companies that are working on autonomous vehicles right now, because we've had a welcoming approach, a light touch regulatory approach, so these companies can grow their new technologies on this new revolutionary stride forward in our transportation sector. Now, we also have a perfect place to live and enjoy life, and we're now in a recruiting battle, and there's no better place to recruit talent than somebody can come to Washington and ski and sail on the same day and enjoy a beautiful place with clean air and clean water and a very cosmopolitan culture that embraces all kinds of foods and music from around the world. This is a great place to recruit a 23-year-old computer scientist, and that has been one of our secrets of success.
That was Washington Governor Jay Inslee speaking with our Bloomberg News reporter, Karen Wise. Well, Airbnb is getting directly involved in the real estate side of the business. The San Francisco company saying it's working with a Miami-based developer to design a 324-unit apartment building that will carry the Airbnb name. Tenants will be encouraged to sublet their spaces online, and guests will have access to amenities commonly found in hotels. The first building in the new venture, called Nido Powered by Airbnb, will be in Kissimmee, Florida. Coming up, the Chinese government is making a push to gain control over some of the country's biggest names in technology. Can they succeed? We will discuss next. This is Bloomberg. The Chinese government is looking to gain a stronger foothold in some of the biggest tech companies in the country. Beijing is seeking a stake in companies like Tencent and Weibo, among others. This according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. Internet regulators are looking to obtain 1% stakes and a management role. The idea of these so-called special management shares was first presented in a draft proposal in the spring of 2016. Joining me now to discuss, Bloomberg's Selena Wang. So we know that the Chinese government already holds a very powerful sway over these companies. How is this different?
This shows that it's even getting more powerful and even more of an entrance into these large tech companies. And some observers find this pretty concerning because these are no longer just media companies. Tencent,
this isn't something they've done before, right?
Chinese government has historically taken positions in companies, right? But in media companies, they've mostly aired on the side of we're censoring the content. And that's something that we've really seen happen a lot more over the course of this past year. Now, taking a board seat, now that is going further than what most people have expected. It's unclear how much of a say they would have in business decisions, however. And it's concerning because now Tencent has data in the world of healthcare. They've also entered in transportation. These are not just media companies, but we know that Xi Jinping's goal is to really control the online world and the type of message and content that's spread on these platforms.
So we know that WhatsApp most recently, the latest U.S. social messaging service that was blocked. How does this fit into the broader Chinese government efforts? And do we know that this is only something they're doing ahead of this big Communist Party meeting that's coming up, or is this long term?
Right. I mean, if you talk to experts in this area who watch China very closely, they say this is the new normal. This is the new Xi regime. He is really taking the Chinese government and saying that he wants to establish a sort of persona cult-like leadership of the country. And as you mentioned earlier, there was the WhatsApp crackdown. Thousands of websites have been shut down. Live streaming apps have closed. They even released regulation that bans women from eating bananas on live streaming because it has a seductive air to it. Right. And so it's gone quite far, and it's really a very concerted effort to clamp down on these companies.
So I spoke with Baidu President Yashing Zhang about this and said it looks like they're going in the opposite direction when it comes to the Chinese government. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Overall, the internet industry is booming in China. However, when you operate in any region, whether it's China or outside of China, there are regulations, policies any company need to abide by.
So I push back on that a little bit. Obviously, it seems to me like things are going in the opposite direction. How likely is it that this proposal for special management shares will go through?
Right, so sources have told Bloomberg that this has been in discussion since last year, so it's obviously in pretty advanced stages, but the exact methodology and details of how it's going to be done, that's not quite clear. How are these shares going to be purchased? Is it going to be through some special fund? Is it going to be state-owned media enterprises buying these shares? How much of a control are they going to have aside from content? So there's still a lot of questions hanging in the air, but this is definitely a headline risk risk that's ongoing for these Chinese companies. No matter how successful they are, they cannot predict what regulators are going to do. It's always a gray line there.
Do we know much about how much these companies actually push back on the government? When we ask them publicly, they say, look, we have to abide by the law, and that's the law.
Even when I speak to Chinese executives on background, they say, yes, that's the law. That's what we have to do. There's not really much you can say against that. But there is a sort of sense that this is a gray line. Things ebb and flow. The party Congress is coming out. At this point in time, it's much safer to just follow the rules and not push back. But then maybe in a year's time, things will go back the other way again. But that being said, the overarching theme of Xi Jinping is that there is going to be stricter crackdowns, and for companies like Facebook and Google, like, don't even try.
Right. Since 2008, 2009, they've been out. Okay, Selena Wang, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, thank you so much for that update, and thank you all for watching this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Be sure to tune in to Friday's show for our exclusive conversation with Golden State Warriors president and COO Rick Welts. You don't want to miss that one. And we'll talk about the team's travels to China. That's tomorrow.